It sounded like the kind of smart aleck stunt that you could expect from a low-rent outfit like Get Up. If their intention was to damage the National Press Club guest, they didn't do that at all. They, in fact, illustrated many of her points about the bias of so much of the mainstream media and the fact that a lot of people over the years have never given her a fair go.
The Australian way of life is under threat like never before. Sectarian violence is rife on our streets. The political class is silencing mainstream Australians under the guise of hate speech. And the media, universities and major civic organisations continue to fan the flames of division. Australia is without leadership and Australians are losing hope. 2026 will be the year that defines the future of our great nation. Are we up to the task?
Hello, Tony, and g'day to all of our viewers and listeners. Great to be back with you. Today we'll be discussing the latest developments in Iran, Senator Pauline Hanson's National Press Club address, Tony Abbott's call to deal with the shark attacks, plus the latest developments in the United Kingdom. Tony, great to be back with you.
As always, Dan, lovely to be with you and our listeners.
All right, well, let's kick off with Iran. There has been just over the last day or so a ceasefire of sorts, I guess a memorandum to cease hostilities for 60 days. This seems like a fairly good development on the face of it. Anything that gets the Strait of Hormuz opened up and stops the hostilities is a good thing. Obviously, there's a question mark as to what happens after 60 days if they don't get to an agreement or a negotiation. So, Tony, just very interested in your assessment of whether this is a sensible starting point for hopefully what is a lasting peace.
I want to begin by making two important points, Stan. First of all credit to President Trump for taking serious action to permanently deny Iran access to nuclear weapons, something which none of his predecessors, including Ronald Reagan, were prepared to do. Second, let's also give to the Americans and the Israelis credit for very seriously degrading the Iranian war machine. So I think those 2 points need to be made. That said, this deal does appear to be very generous to the Iranian regime. It does, on the face of it, commit other countries to rewarding the Iranian regime with some $300 billion and rapidly ending all the sanctions which have put the Iranian regime under so much pressure. My fundamental conviction, Dan, is that as long as the apocalyptic Islamist theocracy in Tehran survives, it will be a menace not just to its own people but to the wider world. And the fact that as soon as they were under pressure, they threw weapons at all of their neighbours, including their Muslim neighbours, suggests to me that this is a regime that can never be reformed, that can never be changed. And nothing in their conduct or language suggests that they have given up on their fundamental objectives to wipe out Israel and ultimately to wipe out the United States as well. And any idea that the Iranians can be trusted when they say that they won't further develop nuclear weapons. Let's face it, they've been saying for decades that they're not developing nuclear weapons, but plainly they were developing nuclear weapons. So, yes, let's be grateful for what seems to be the reopening of the Straits of Hormuz, but I don't believe that the Iranian problem has ended. And I do think that the patent unwillingness of the Trump administration to take casualties in order to see this conduct, this campaign through, would have been noted in places like Beijing. Now, again, while I'm sounding critical of President Trump, the truth is that he got no support from his traditional allies. There was rhetorical support only from Australia. There was hardly even rhetorical support from Canada. And while Britain did fly some defensive missions in the Gulf to protect its Gulf allies, there was nothing like the kind of support from Britain that traditionally the Americans could have expected. yes, President Trump hasn't exactly been emollient towards his allies. And I guess if you treat people mean, they're not likely to stay keen. But I think this is a pretty unsatisfactory situation, and I can't see what's been agreed stopping Iranian troublemaking. I can't see it permanently denying them nuclear weapons. Frankly, I think the only safe outcome is regime change in Tehran, and that seems as far away as ever.
So what do you think's motivated it? You mentioned the unwillingness to take casualties as one example. We know that the midterms are coming up in November, and the generic Republican v. Democrat doesn't look good for Republican at the moment. Is it a domestically motivated consideration, do you think, or has Trump just had enough and he wanted to get out of it?
I suspect both factors were at play. Certainly, when I was recently in America, there was a lot of unhappiness at things like rising petrol prices, and I guess that's understandable, but if the president had done more to explain to his people exactly why it was necessary to take stern action against Iran, if he had done what was necessary to engage the allies so that they were of some material help, I think we would be in a happier situation. In the end, in a democracy, you can't sustain any course of action for long unless you can take your own people with you. And the only way to take your own people with you is to be upfront with them, including about the downside and the sacrifices that might be required of them. And for any sustained combat, obviously sacrifices will be required. Sacrifices of treasure, sacrifices of blood, and ultimately sacrifices of convenience in the daily life of citizens. And that wasn't done. I think that, again, I stress, President Trump was absolutely right to want to rid the world forever of the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon, given the constantly repeated intentions of the Islamist apocalyptic theocracy in Tehran to wipe out Israel and the United States, indeed all non-believers who wouldn't submit to a global caliphate. That was absolutely a good intention, but you've got to carry people with you, and not much of an effort was made.
Okay, well, let's go to the domestic front. And I think one of the key developments over the last week or so has been Senator Pauline Hanson's National Press Club address, which covered a lot of topics. A lot of policy areas and issues were canvassed, including a very frontal attack on multiculturalism, net zero, the gender ideology, and a lot of other issues besides. I thought it was a pretty strong speech, I've got to say, in terms of the substance of the issue. And I think one of the good things about this is a lot of sacred cows are now sort of being attacked in a way that they perhaps previously weren't. So I thought it was a fairly strong speech in that regard. I'm interested in your perspective on the substance and the content of the speech, and also whether it changes or affects the current dynamic of One Nation and their rise and fairly high vote at the moment in the polls.
Well, Dan, look, it was vintage Hanson. It was a 45-minute elaboration of the things that Pauline Hanson and One Nation have been saying on and off for a long time now. Yes, she doesn't like multiculturalism. Yes, she hates net zero. Yes, she wants migration numbers right down. Yes, she doesn't trust the Canberra bureaucracy. Yes, she hates political correctness and wants just one flag and no acknowledgements of country. She said in her own way the things that Angus Taylor has been saying in his own way since he became the leader. And I guess when you are listening to all of this, the really big question is, how do you get a government that can deliver on all of this? And what is the detailed implementation strategy for bringing it all about? And while I have a degree of respect for the One Nation leaders' resilience and consistency, in the end, what we need at the moment is a credible alternative government, because the only way the desirable objectives that were enunciated yesterday and the very similar desirable objectives that were enunciated in Angus Taylor's budget reply, the only way they'll happen is if there is a change of government. And I think that what the Australian public need right now is not simply a critique of what's going on, but a credible plan to make it better in government. And I still say that by far the most credible alternative party of government is the Liberal Party in strong coalition with the National Party.
You've talked about the potential need for preference deals to be done between the Liberal Party and One Nation, and others in the Liberal Party, Tony Passon, the most prominent of them, have talked about not competing in certain seats against one another. Others have a different view. They don't necessarily believe that a deal can or should be done. I think if the Liberal Party is to survive, obviously a deal needs to be done, in my view. I think that's pretty apparent. But what's your thinking on this at the moment? Is it still keep it to a preference deal? Has it evolved since then? What's your perspective on this?
Well, the point that has been made by everyone from Angus Taylor down is that we, the Liberal Party, are prepared to work constructively with anyone who is eager to get rid of a terrible government. That's what we want. We want to work with people to get rid of a terrible government. Now, I've made the point that just as parties of the left typically preference each other, why wouldn't parties of the left do exactly the same thing? But Dan, an election is 18 months, possibly 2 years off. It's very early to be talking about deals, arrangements, pacts. I think that the challenge for all of us right now is to highlight just what damage this appalling government is doing to our economy, to our social cohesion, to our strategic well-being, to point out the damage that's being done, to point out the near impossibility of any improvement under the current government, given their obsessions with the politics of climate and identity, and to develop the kind of clear policy prescriptions which are needed for Australians to get the better government that they so richly deserve.
There's been some in the party, though, who have sort of, in a way, disparaged One Nation a bit. I think, including, with Barnaby Joyce and sort of making light of his personal life and situation and things like that, which I just think is very silly, because at the end of the day, I think the overwhelming majority of people who are backing One Nation are decent, hardworking, patriotic Australians that want to save their country. And I think that they need to be talked to with respect. I'm not saying everyone in the party is doing this, but I just think most of these people have left the Liberal Party. And to me, they should be respected and listened to rather than talked down to, as some, not all, but some within the party have had a tendency to do. And I think it's pretty damaging.
Well, I think that's a reasonable point to make, Dan. I mean, I can remember years and years ago when I was first the party leader, journalists would often say to me things like, "Oh, Mr. Turnbull has said this, Mr. Turnbull has said that. What's your response?" To which my answer normally was, "Well, my argument is with Mr. Rudd, not with Mr. Turnbull." I go back to 1998 when One Nation first burst onto the scene. And there were certainly people on the coalition side who were critical of One Nation, myself included, because you might remember that one of Pauline Hanson's close collaborators had previously worked for me, and I was not very happy at having someone moonlight for someone else while working for me. So I was very critical of One Nation back then. Interestingly, and he was criticised greatly at the time for it, Prime Minister John Howard was careful not to be critical of Pauline Hanson, not to be critical of those who thought she was giving voice to some of their grievances. And I think that the fact that John, as Prime Minister, focused on running a better government, coming up with the answers that Australia needed at that time, was what in the end helped to reinvigorate the coalition and in the end see off that particular challenge. And I think there are a lot of lessons there. So look, if individual members of the coalition say something stroppy, well, hey, individual members of One Nation have said things stroppy about us. And if it's wrong for the coalition to be critical of One Nation, surely it's also wrong for One Nation to be critical of the coalition. If there's a rule for one, surely there should be a rule for the other as well.
Mm. Just in terms of Get Up and the stunt that they pulled at the National Press Club, I thought was pretty foolish if you were wanting to get a hit on Pauline Hanson, because this has simply helped her by basically, I think, reinforcing the claims that Senator Hanson has made about being ganged up on by the elites. And it looks like this could be causing some pretty big legal problems, actually, for Get Up. So I think they've really made a big mistake here, no matter which way you look at it. What's your perspective on what happened at the press club in that regard?
Look, I didn't actually see it. I've only read the reports, but it sounded like the kind of smart aleck stunt that you could expect from a low-rent outfit like Get Up. And yes, if their intention was to somehow damage the National Press Club guest, they didn't do that at all. They, in fact, illustrated many of her points about the, I guess, bias of so much of the mainstream media and the fact that a lot of people over the years have never given her a fair go.
Hi, thanks for watching. Did you know that 3/4 of you watching this podcast aren't currently subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? So do us a favour, hit subscribe and you won't miss any of the action. While you're at it, head to ipa.org.au, follow the prompts to subscribe to the IPA's website, so that way you will find all of our research and analysis. Now back to the chat. Yeah, okay, well, let's turn to another one, which I thought was an interesting one. You weighed into the debate a little while ago on a shark attack that took place at Coogee Beach in Sydney, and you really had a lot of cut through when you were saying, look, we need to kill these sharks that are hovering around where people want to swim and to surf. And to me, that's pretty uncontroversial, I would have thought. Yes, we should share the ocean with the animals that are in the ocean, but that doesn't mean that should come at the expense of human life and people that want to enjoy the beach and enjoy the surf, particularly in a country like Australia. So I know you've been passionate about this issue, being a surfer yourself and also a surf lifesaver. So just elaborate on your thoughts on this matter, because I thought it was very interesting and also a very Australian sort of topic to discuss.
Well, Dan, you're right. The beach has been an iconic part of the Australian way of life for at least the last 120 years, ever since they went on to Manly Beach in daylight hours in swimming costumes in defiance of the then law.
So I don't think your budgie smugglers would have been allowed back then, would they?
No, they were rather more sort of burkini type swimming costumes back then. Look, Dan, I think it would be a tragedy for our country if the beach culture, the surf culture, the outdoors culture that we've enjoyed and made so much of for so long was suddenly to be inhibited because people were terrified of going into the water lest they be taken by a shark. Now, between the 1930s and very recently, there were no fatal shark attacks on Sydney beaches for two reasons. First, there was a commercial shark fishery, and second, there was netting or meshing off Sydney beaches. Now, between the commercial shark fishery, which kept shark numbers down, and the meshing, which kept sharks away from places where people were congregating, we never had a fatality for almost 100 years. We've now started to have fatalities again for two reasons. First, with the protection of great whites, the most dangerous of the shark species. There are far more dangerous sharks around. And second, the meshing and the netting is gradually being reduced and is taken away during the winter months. Now, I just think we've got to be real here. We've got to get real here. Whose side are we on? Are we on the side of the sharks or are we on the side of the people? Now, I'm all in favour of sharks a mile or so offshore. But as soon as the sharks get to where people are, I think we've got to absolutely put people first. So let's try to keep the sharks out. And if the sharks come in, well, let's catch them, let's cull them, let's remove them. But it stands to reason. People before sharks. And I want to draw a contrast, Dan. At the moment, the New South Wales government is shooting from the air the brumbies of the Kosciuszko National Park, because the brumbies of the Kosciuszko National Park are supposedly causing a damage to the environment. Well, I want to make 2 points. First, brumbies have never killed anyone. There's been no fatal brumbie attack anywhere, as far as I am aware. And second, the brumbies aren't doing nearly as much environmental damage as Snowy 2.0 and the general spread of renewables is doing to national parks and other parts of our beautiful landscape. So why be only too happy to kill the brumbies by aerial shooting, but suddenly be incredibly squeamish about killing man-eating sharks? This is part of the modern madness. It's part of the, I guess, tendency to get things out of all proportion and focus on the trivial while at the same time ignoring the important. So I just don't get the New South Wales politicians who are saying, oh, it's impossible to change the rules on protecting great whites. It's wrong to somehow cull the sharks because the ocean belongs to them. Well, I tell you, if the high country doesn't belong to the brumbies, why does the ocean suddenly belong to sharks and no one else but sharks?
Well, Tony, I think it's a very good distinction to draw. And to me, it's always been a bit weird as to why there's been this obsession around the sharks and not being able to cull them or manage their population. And to me, it's sometimes felt that there's some weird self-hate thing going on where some of those who don't want to do that are really targeting not so much the shark issue, but that they don't like that element of Australian culture. Maybe they find it too sort of, I don't know, reminder of the things they don't like about Australia, people getting out and having fun in the surf. I don't know, but it's often felt strange to me. Do you have any perspectives on that?
Yes, I do think that there is a kind of a anti-human quality to some of the so-called experts in this area. I do think that there has been a tendency to look down on our culture, to exalt all cultures but our own. And plainly, for the average Aussie over the last 100 years, getting to the beach, getting out into the water, maybe picking up your surfboard and going out behind the breakers, that's all been incredibly important, but not so important, it seems, to a big swathe of officialdom. Now, again, Dan, I want to stress, I regard myself as a conservationist. I want clean air, I want clean water, I want native species protected, I want to see our native bush preserved and cherished, all those things. But in any direct clash between humans and dangerous wild animals, the humans have got to come first.
All right, well, let's go to the United Kingdom, and I want to talk about this because there's a very interesting by-election that's coming up, which is not just a typical by-election, but that could result in some serious ruptures for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. But of course, this is all taking place in the shadow of the murder of Henry Nowak, the 18-year-old boy who was murdered in Southampton in England after being stabbed by someone of an Indian background, who's now been sentenced to 21 years in jail, or at least minimum of 21 years in jail. And of course, Henry was basically left to die by the police, at the hands of the police, even though he told them he'd been stabbed and couldn't breathe, and they went about arresting him. And also the attempted beheading in Belfast by a Sudanese asylum seeker, which has led to lots of riots and civil unrest in the area as well. So let's just start with that situation. Obviously, it's at a boiling point in the UK, has been for some time. This feels like it's a very, very unstable and dangerous time for the United Kingdom.
Well, you're right, Dan. Britain is at a low ebb, and successive governments have failed to control immigration, have failed to put sufficient stress on British values and the need to integrate and assimilate. And in more recent times, we've seen, if you like, double standard policing, where the police have bent over backwards to accommodate minorities as opposed to apply the law fairly and impartially to everyone. So this is a very serious symptom of societal fragmentation, of national decline. And I think it's only right that people are outraged by what's happened. I just very much doubt that the current British government, which is very much a Green left government, almost entirely like-minded with the current government in Australia in this respect, I just very much doubt that the current government will do anything significant to control migration, legal and illegal, to reinforce the best British values and to build social cohesion, and back the police to take very strong action against all lawbreakers, regardless of their ethnicity or culture. I just think that Green left political parties throughout the West, but particularly the Anglosphere, have been so contaminated by identity politics that their ability to adopt common sense positions and then implement them are just hopelessly compromised.
Yeah, and this is what leads us to the by-election talk, which is, but when this goes to air, basically going to be happening now as we speak. So this is in Makerfield, which is the Greater Manchester area. I think there's two others happening as well, but this is the main one. Andy Burnham, who's the Labor contender, he's the mayor of Greater Manchester, has been since 2017, and he was previously a member of Parliament from 2001 to 2017. Now, he's being touted by some as, if he does win, that he's going to be making a challenge to Keir Starmer for the Prime Minister, or for the leader of the Labor Party, and therefore as the Prime Minister. I wonder whether this would actually make any difference, as you sort of suggest. I think the government is the problem, not just the person who's the head of the government at the moment. But I am interested in your perspective from two things. One is the Labor Party dynamic here. And secondly, all eyes are going to be on reform, whether they can get up or whether Restore UK, which is Rupert Lowe's party, actually could take enough vote away from reform and result in, because of their first past the post system, Labor getting up as a result. So if you don't mind, give me your views on that.
Okay, Dan, well, you're right. I think the problem is not the individual who's currently the British Prime Minister. I think the problem is the Green left British Labor Party, which has also got a fair sprinkling of Islamists as well amongst its members and supporters. So I think the problem is Labor, not Keir Starmer, although there's no doubt Keir Starmer has been a deeply underwhelming Prime Minister. My understanding from listening to Tony Blair is that Andy Burnham, the would-be Prime Minister, is a bit of a political chameleon. My understanding is that he was a Blairite back in the day. He's moved to the green quasi-Marxist left in more recent times. Yes, he seems to have been moderately effective or successful as the mayor, but I suspect that there are local factors involved there rather than any particular brilliance of the individual. Now, as a Australian Liberal, my instinctive loyalty in British politics is to the Conservative Party. And I would like to see in Britain, as in Australia, the most credible alternative party of government flourishing under these circumstances. I accept that in Britain, as in Australia, a lot of traditional Conservatives are disillusioned with their long-time mainstream representative and therefore are backing insurgent parties on the right. And obviously, Nigel Farage is a charismatic individual. He's done a lot of good things for Britain, including leading the Brexit debate, indeed making Brexit happen. I mean, Boris Johnson might have been the Prime Minister who got it done, but the spiritual father of Brexit was absolutely Nigel Farage, and good on him for that. And yes, you're right. There is now an insurgency further to the right of Nigel Farage and reform, and it would be ironic if Labor won the seat because of a fight on the right between the Conservative Party, Reform and Restore. And this is where I think all of us have got to be realistic. If you want to get rid of a really bad Labor government, you've got to go about it intelligently and without being too prescriptive about what should happen in this country in 2 years' time. Plainly, it would be, I think, bad for conservatism more broadly in Britain if divisions on the centre-right of politics meant that, yet again, the Labor Party had a win. So I think these are things that we've got to be very conscious of. I mean, what is the most intelligent and the most effective way to give countries a better government? And it's not always by voting for that which you personally find most attractive. It may well be by voting for that which has the best chance of bringing about the best outcome.
All right, Tony, we'll leave it there for this week. Thanks, as always, for your insights, and look forward to catching up again in a couple of weeks.
Me too, Dan.
This is a production of the Centre for the Australian Way of Life at the Institute of Public Affairs. To find out more, visit australia.ipa.org.au.